Andrés, does an NFT purchaser have a copyright in the existing artwork or merely in the digital copy owned?
Well, Francesca, I think that that's a really interesting question, and I think that it's I would say that is, from the legal perspective, is one of the main issues that we're dealing right now, of exactly, first of all, what is an NFT? And to answer that, we need to really take a look at what is exactly happening on the technical side. And if we take a look at the different projects out there, I mean, we've seen so many things and so many variations on different kind of NFTs and how they are, set up. And obviously that has an impact on exactly the rights that are being transferred. I mean, we've seen stuff really complex where the actual copyright, the actual work of art is introduced, is embedded into the NFT itself, which in that case, one could argue that there is an actual copyright in that sense, that the author, the creator of the art is actually putting out in the market, is creating it and selling it to a purchaser. And we have seen other cases where the NFT is merely, if you want to call it a receipt, or if you want to be a little bit more benign with the NFT, a proof of ownership of it, and that's it. So what is exactly happening on the legal side when it comes to the intellectual property? I think that it's an open-ended question, and it taps into a bigger discussion about, in general, virtual assets and particularly cryptocurrencies and tokens, about exactly if we can own it or not. I mean, if it falls within the category of being ownership, and we put it into the category of real rights, for example, in the typical civil jurisdictions. Should we treat it as an obligation? I mean, as a contract. I mean, as a contract, as an obligation between two parties. In this case, for example, the NFT, the author, and then the subsequent purchasers, and etc. Or, I mean, we are dealing with something that is completely new, and we need to develop new categories to deal with that. So, particularly when it comes to your question, I think that in general, I mean, we have to take a look at the different, NFTs and concrete projects. Most of them do not grant a copyright over the art. They are merely, as I said before, a receipt, a proof of something, a proof that you are the owner of that, and that's it. And in some cases, we've seen that there are a little bit some more complex structures when it comes to the legal framework of the NFT. And we are seeing some cases, for example, in the case of the Bored Apes, in that case, there is an actual transfer of the copyright, but the transfer of the copyright, I mean, if we take a look, for example, at the NFT, the license, the contract that transfers the copyright is not in the NFT itself, but rather is located in the platform that the Bored Apes were distributed. So again, we are seeing that the legal structure for the NFTs is absolutely varied, it's completely diverse, and we really have to go on a case-by-case situation and analyze what is happening in that case. Perhaps, and taking a little bit more of a deeper look into the NFTs and actual the configuration of using the smart contracts and using blockchains for all of this, is opening up a discussion that in academia is really interesting. The kind of discussion that this has opened, in the sense of, can we actually consider, for example, the code on a blockchain as a written agreement? Can we consider it as a contract from the legal point of view? Can we consider code as another language? I mean, we can write a contract in English, Spanish, Italian, Chinese, whatever. Can we actually consider, for example, Solidity as a valid language to write a contract, and using that contract written, drafted on a blockchain? Something that we've seen a lot with smart contracts, and a lot of projects that are actually going in that direction. For example, open law, etc. I mean, they're moving into the direction of actually considering the code as a written contract. That's one thing. And the other thing is, actually, okay, let's assume that we can actually consider that code as that piece of code as a contract. Did we sign it? I mean, in most cases, for example, for transfer of copyright, for a licensing agreement, whatever, you usually need to sign it to be considered as a contract. So the electronic signatures that are being used in the different blockchains, and obviously we are entering into that whole sort of discussion about the different types of blockchains and how they operate and all of that. But I mean, in general, we can pose the question of actually, are these signatures, these electronic signatures, considered as an electronic signature in the legal sense? I mean, for example, if we take a look at Europe, and probably it's a model that is copied all over the world with the AIDAS regulation. I mean, you have different categories, and no matter what category you fall into, I mean, that electronic signature is considered as a valid signature. We can then argue exactly what are the legal effects that kind of electronic signature pose, but it has, I mean, it shouldn't be disregarded merely by the fact that it's an electronic signature. So it also taps into that other discussion. And I think that when it comes to NFTs, as I said before, I mean, it's really varied, the kind of situations. And in most cases, I mean, from what I've seen in platforms and NFTs themselves, in most cases, there is no transfer of the copyright of the underlying work. So you have an issue there. But again, I mean, this is a sort of a playing field, I like to call it. And we are just experimenting in that sense. So obviously, as we move forwards with all of that, I mean, we're going to start seeing, you know, the actual art, the actual work, the actual thing that is protected under copyright embedded into the NFT. And probably then it will make sense to start discussing about this. Hey, actually the code of the NFT, is it actually containing, you know, all the details, all the agreement? Is it actually governing the copyright itself, how it can be assigned, in which territories can be used? I mean, because we're dealing with, you know, NFTs is dealing on the online world, and we jump into this discussion or this idea of, you know, there are no borders, etc. But again, when you need to, you know, enforce legal rights, you have to rely on borders. You have to rely on jurisdictions. So that's also another issue, you know, that transfer of a copyright or the licensing agreement. I mean, exactly in which jurisdiction does it have a place? Does it have a time limit? So a lot of questions that are usually unanswered, and that's why, you know, taking that restrictive approach that you can see in general when it comes to intellectual property. Clearly, in that sense, we are not seeing transfers of copyright when it comes to the NFTs, but rather, you know, just the NFT as itself, as that receipt that some people are giving it value, and that's it. So there is a lot of, you know, buyer beware in that sense when it comes to buying NFTs in general.